The upcoming dates are mainly the images essay, which is creeping up upon us very quickly. So I want to make sure that you are thinking about that as something that you need to be dealing with now, because October 10th is only a few weeks away. We're also going to have that gap thanks to the holidays, so I want to have extra opportunities to discuss it with you. Are we all clear on the concept of the images essay, what we need to do? Does anybody want me to talk for a couple minutes about the images essay and clarify? Yes, okay, good. Wow, that's responsive, that's great, I love it. I should ask easy questions more often. Okay, so there are two. Bear with me, those of you who have had me before, because I do this in all of my classes. But there are two options for the images essay. The first option is that is for you to find a image that is, for you to go to a museum and look at two pieces that are religious in content in some way from the ancient world, that depict the same subject, but that are from different times and places, times or places. So you could choose a Greek goddess of love and a Roman goddess of love, or an Egyptian goddess of love. Or it doesn't need to be a divine figure. It could be a priestess from one culture and a priestess from another culture, or something from early on in the Greek story and something from later on in the Greek story. But the idea is for you to see how this idea is expressed similarly and differently by these two artists. These two artists are being presented with the same idea, and how they express that idea. What does it mean to be a love goddess? What does it mean to be a priestess? Is going to be reflected in their work. So the writing about this is subjective. What you're going to do is look for three different aspects. Facial expression, how they are attired, the stiffness or fluidity of how they look. Look for three kinds of things that you can talk about that are present in each work, and then write your essay talking about how those two pieces compare on those 3 points, and what your impression is of what that can tell us about the cultures that these artists and what these artists are trying to say, what it tells us about these cultures. So you don't need to do any additional research. I'm asking you to experience these two pieces of art and talk about what you think they might be able to say to us. Yes?
I remember last semester in the History of Rome class, you allowed us to use films, and you didn't also. We're allowed to look online for articles and stuff. So this year you don't want that? So
the second option is to do the film thing, which I'm about to talk about. My preference for the museum option is. Thank you. My preference for the museum option is for you to experience it in person. And things are back to normal enough that I think that's feasible. If it's not feasible, then using imagery is a fallback option from the website. And you can use the website in any event to pre-game what you would go to look at. So you can, if you're going to the Met, you can check the Met website and sort of get a sense. Oh, there's this I might want to see, or this, or whatever. In terms of what's presently being exhibited. But the thing about art is that it has to be experienced face to face. You look at sculpture, you look at bas relief or fresco or something like that. We've seen images of the Last Supper. We've seen images of Michelangelo's David. It's not the same as being in his physical presence, because art is designed to be interactive. It's supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be provocative. And the intercession of photography inhibits that. So my preference is for you to go to the museum in person. The second option is to look for a film that has some sort of religious content that is connected to the ancient world. It doesn't have to be a whole film about some religious topic, but a lot of films that have to do with the ancient world. Sometimes you have films like The Immortals or something like that are yes. This is yes, that's it. Okay. So sometimes you have films that are about mythology, the Clash of the Titans, that kind of thing. Sometimes you have films that are about human affairs in the ancient world, and how people deal with the gods becomes relevant. If you're up to the challenge, there are certain films that should deal with the gods that don't, and I'm thinking in particular about Troy, in which the filmmaker deliberately excluded all of the divine material, and you can talk about what the filmmaker is trying to say by excluding the divine material. But the point is for you to find a film that deals with the ancient world, that has religious content, and compare it to the source material that it comes from, the primary sources from the ancient world. So if you were doing Troy, for example, or if you were doing Clash of the Titans, you would find the original myths that these stories came from. If you were doing Troy, you would be looking at the specific portions of the Iliad. If you were doing something like 300, then you would be comparing it to Herodotus' account of the Battle of Thermopylae. And I can help you find those correspondences. There's a list of possibilities about films that are about the ancient world in general on the website at the bottom of the Images essay page. So make sure to think about which option you would like to choose and what you're interested in writing about, and then you can run some ideas past me, send me an email, come to my office hours at 5 o'clock, and I'd be more than happy to talk with you about it. But start making those plans, because you need to block you need to set aside a block of time to do the writing. You also need another block of time to do the museum trip, or to watch the film and research the sources. So start planning that out now, so that you can be sure to submit the essay on time. So that's the Images essay, either the museum option or the film option. Any other questions about that? Does that make sense? Everything that I'm looking for is on the Images essay page on the website, which, lest we forget, is me. It's all about me. It's all on the course website. Go to the essays page, look at the Images tab, and everything I'm looking for is explained there. And there's a video at the top right that answers a lot of the questions that people have as they're starting on this and trying to figure out how to go. I think you'll find It's a lot of fun to actually write because it's meant to be your subjective responses. It's meant to be, you know, how you feel, how you perceive, you know, these creative works as an audience. So that makes sense. Any other questions about that? All right, come and see me. Talk to me about this. Don't leave this to the last minute. Make the plans now. This is the first week with a quiz. That can also be fun. But seriously, so the quiz is part of the process of the course, part of your course grade. It's online, so we don't have to do it in class. And the link is on the schedule page under week 3. So due on Sunday, needs to be submitted on Sunday. That's a firm deadline, so make sure that you've completed the quiz and submitted it. You'll get a response back from me. If you don't get a response back from me in a reasonable amount of time, follow up with me and make sure that it was received. Sometimes the quiz was saved, but there was a fumble with the email, and I'll still have the quiz on the back end. But there's an option for you to save the quiz when you're done with it. You can print it or copy the text or whatever. After you're done with it, it'll give you a screen that lets you do that. And you can have that as backup in addition to having it submitted to me. But you'll hear back from me by email, and then I will grade them next week. One thing to bear in mind is that the questions that appear on the quiz are in relation to the readings, and they might very well come up in class as well. So that is a good reason to be awake. Any questions about the quizzes or anything else that's coming up? Any questions about the readings, the assignments, the processes?
Actually, a question about the images essays. So,
yeah.
How long should it be minimum?
It's 3 to 4 pages, so that'll give you a chance to. And there is a page called on the website that's called Requirements for All Papers. It's under Essay Musts on the toolbar, and that will specify exactly what I need in terms of formatting. One of the things in terms of citations, the images essay you don't need footnotes for the museum option, but there is a special set of instructions for what I want on the works cited page. And the same is true for the film option. For the film option, you don't need to footnote the film, but I do need you to specify the sources. I do need you to give footnotes for the primary source reading that you're using. So you just need to either as a footnote or as a parenthetical cite, you need to have, whatever your source was, and then, either the chapter and verse, the book and section number. Most ancient texts are divided up into books and section numbers, and anything that any place that you find that material will have it broken up that way. Or if you're looking at it in actual book form, then you would give the reference to the page number. You can do it as a footnote. You can do it as a parenthetical cite. It doesn't matter to me which citations format you use, as long as you provide that information. And then in your bibliography, you give, the bibliography citation for for the source that you use. If you're not sure what that is, ask me, and I'll be happy to help you out with that before you submit. This is a good time to mention that on my website there is a citation center on the resources page that gives concise information about what you need to do for footnotes and bibliographies in general. The basic idea is a bibliography lists the works that you used, and then your footnote or parenthetical citation points to something in your bibliography and then says where in that work this piece of information comes from. You need to provide a citation for any information that comes from a source that is outside of your own head. Any information that comes from someone else needs to have a citation, whether it is a direct quote or a paraphrase or just an idea. A lot of people come to classes like this and have the impression that you only need to provide footnotes or citations for direct quotes. That's not true. If you're paraphrasing it, it still comes from that place. And so you still need to identify, you still need to acknowledge that this information that you're giving comes from that place. So to repeat, I only need you to do that for the primary source material for the film option. For the museum, for this paper, you don't need to do that. You don't need to provide footnotes for the film. If you feel like doing that anyway, you say, okay, this happens in Clash of the Titans, at 1 hour and 30 minutes. That's fine if you want to. The important thing is that you need to cite the primary source you're comparing it to. Primary sources are there's a directory of primary sources in English translation on my website on the ancient texts page. So if you know that you need to look at some passage from an author named Plutarch, then you can go to the ancient text page, look under P for Plutarch, and there it is. There's a link to an exhaustive list of Plutarch's works in English translation. And again, anything that you have questions about, anything that you're not sure about, I don't know how to find this work, I want to do this film, I don't know what the primary source material is, I'm thinking about going to the museum, but I'm not sure what I want to look at, or I saw these two pieces, and I think I might know what I want to say about it, but I want to talk to you about it. Anything like that, come to me. I'm more than happy to help you figure out how to say this stuff. I'm here as a resource. Like I said in the first class meeting, I'm here to be used, which is why I work at CUNY. Yes, yeah.
I have my register for write-up.
Okay, so that goes for the responses write-up.
Yeah, will I present it today?
Well, it's not a presentation. It's just an essay. So you can go ahead and post that to Blackboard, and we're not doing presentations in class for the responses write-up. I wish I could, but we only have the one class meeting per week.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So just to be clear on the citing of a film, so do you just put the title and then the timestamp, or do you also put the director?
For the works cited page, it says on the web page. It gives you instructions of what I'm looking for. But yeah, you get the title and information about the film director. So take a look at the images essay page and see, because there's a lot of things that I said. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you don't need to do. Take a look at that. All right. Let's talk about. I want to talk about Gilgamesh really quick. uh, um, in terms of last week's reading, I want to get a sense of what you thought was most impressed you out of all of that, out of what happened with the what you saw with the reading. Actually, since you did the responses, is there anything in particular that stood out to you the most as you were looking at now? Now that I've got you, now that I've already said you didn't have to worry about it. Is there anything in particular that you saw that jumped out at you as you were putting this material together about what this reading was saying to us?
Well, I had the righteous sufferer.
You had the
righteous sufferer.
You had the righteous sufferer. So you had this week's reading.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you don't have to worry about that. We'll talk about that next week. So what did you guys? What did you guys think stood out to you about the Gilgamesh reading? About what this is telling us? What we can say about Gilgamesh's attitude toward Ishtar and the way in which they interact with each other? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how the bull, other than bringing about a famine, didn't seem to have any like supernatural powers. Gilgamesh seemed to have easily just stabbed him in the back of the neck.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found interesting was how the point of the story was for Gilgamesh to kill the bull.
Mm-hmm.
And to me that kind of made me feel like the point of the story was as almost like a fable for future kings and the ruled people. And it kind of outlines that the king's job is to fight the natural forces of nature, like floods, famines, and like that's kind of their duty, to organize the society to build things like dams or to store grain in anticipation of a famine.
Right. So the king acting as protector of the people and lands has to do.
And by like killing the bull, or by killing the bull, it's kind of similar to getting rid of a flood or something, because that flood is associated with the gods. So by having Gilgamesh be the one that kills the gods, it's kind of like saying that it's the king's duty to protect his people from these godlike powers.
Right, and there's also an extent to which we're looking at Gilgamesh sort of as a proxy for humanity, because we have the episode just before this is him fighting Humbaba, the forest guardian, and then here he vanquishes the bull from the sky. There's a distinct sense of humanity being able to overpower the forces of nature, to assert authority over what the chaos of nature is able to do. Yes?
Something that comes to attention is that how Gilgamesh is egocentric. Like, he likes people worship him, saying at the end of the story, like who is like the best and the good-looking man here. Like, it makes sense since he's the king, he's the one that everyone should live before.
Mm-hmm.
But it caused me the attention how egocentric about himself he was.
And the ease with which he's able to defeat the bull and the way in which Ishtar is attracted to him seems to reinforce that, seems to justify it, at least is what you're going to say.
I was going to say that I feel like it shows that Gilgamesh was very, very powerful, and maybe that's why Ishtar was attracted to him in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But she just seemed, from my perspective, a little bit tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm a goddess, so if you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill you. But morally, Gilgamesh had to kill the bull because it just showed, like, when you're abusing your power, you're not going to get your way.
Right, so the episode with Gilgamesh and the bull is relatively straightforward. Gilgamesh has a threat, and it's clear that the bull is threatening Uruk. It's not simply that it's a threat to him and Enkidu. And so, as he was saying, this is a responsibility that he has, as well as something that he's able to do. The thing with Ishtar is not so clear cut. I think, because we have an actual goddess who is expressing love, or an attraction to a mortal man. And Gilgamesh, refuses that attraction. Is that just because he's Gilgamesh and he's in a position to do that because he's one step up from ordinary mortals, that he has the audacity to defy a goddess? Or is there something else going on here? What does it mean that Gilgamesh is able to feels able to refuse Ishtar?
He brought up the fact that her past lovers, that she would turn them to dwarves and retaliate against them negatively if she didn't get her way. So he said, like, I'm not.
Right. So he says, I don't want to be turned into a toad, but if a mortal is truly devoted to the gods, the gods are that powerful. We're conditioned to think that we as mortals have to do what the gods say, and so Gilgamesh's response, we would almost expect him to say, okay, well, she likes me, I guess I have to deal with that, and I'll probably be turned into a toad, but that's the fate that the gods have chosen for me. Instead, we have Gilgamesh scornfully defying Ishtar. So that seems to come from more than just Gilgamesh's arrogance. What is this telling us about the way Sumer is thinking about the gods? What is this telling us? What's the underlying? Because the audience for this epic. This epic is written for a reason, right? The audience for this epic is not, wastrel kings. The audience, this is intended to speak to and reinforce ideas with ordinary people. So what's the idea here that's underlying the interactions between Gilgamesh and Ishtar? What do you guys think? What more is this telling us here?
I don't think that she actually loved him.
Right. So he's calling her out on something that she's saying that doesn't hold water. Yeah.
There's a distinction between the humans and the gods in the sense that humans also have to worry or focus on themselves rather than just always pleasing the gods. Because like you had said before about the relationship with the gods were already on the rocks. Like the relationship between the mortal and the gods were already on the rocks. So I think this is just saying that, although we respect them to a certain extent, we have to focus on ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
You said earlier in the class that Gilgamesh is kind of like a proxy for humanity, and by him defying the god like that, making his own choice, maybe it's trying to send the message that people shouldn't look into omens or the will of the gods too much, and should trust their own judgment.
Right, because what even within just the context of the story, without us knowing about the story of the flood and how the gods destroyed everybody and demonstrated their lack of consistent benevolence, just within the story, Gilgamesh has already shown us that Ishtar is a betrayer. Just from the context of the story, Ishtar can't be trusted. And even if a human acts with obedience, the human is rewarded with punishment according to her past actions. And when Gilgamesh acts rationally in self-protection, which should be the goal of the gods, to ensure that people and lands are preserved. If Gilgamesh acts rationally in self-protection, He's visited with punishment and irrational behavior of the gods. The gods can't be trusted. The gods are capricious and fickle, and so the moral is that people have to rely on what they are able to achieve despite the actions of the gods. Yes?
When Gilgamesh was listing off the people Ishtar burned, was he or did he get that information or that notion from a mythology or something? Did Ishtar in some sort of mythology burn those people, or were those people that used to have her as a patron god that ended up maybe something terrible happened to them?
That's a good question. We don't know, us objectively, we don't know for sure. My impression is that the people that he's talking about are folklore, probably not, people that would be within living memory, but people that are, that are known from folklore, where folklore sort of merges into mythology. People would talk about, the story of, just as people in Greece talked about the story of all of the women that Zeus slept with. It would be something that would be very much common knowledge that, as part of the oral traditions of the community. Yeah.
Do you think that maybe Gilgamesh viewed Ishtar as, even though she was a goddess, still a woman who is emotional and can become emotionally disturbed and chaotic, and use that as a way to try to conquer her? Because I feel that him slaying the bull to an extent was similar to him slaying her, and if he slay her, then he's bigger than her.
Right. The bull thing is a sequel to the Ishtar story, and this is partly the point of this is a quest story, and defeating the attentions of Ishtar is one of the adventures along the way of the quest. But the point of this quest is for Gilgamesh to become a better person. So every part of that has to feed into that. What did you guys think? Did you guys get a sense of whether Ishtar is being portrayed, as a woman, as opposed to just as a god? Is there anything in the story that gives us a sense of that one way or another?
Well, I think both at the same time, because the part where she was shown as maintaining her godlyhood or doing what God would do was after the bull was killed, and she was holding rites of mourning with the prostitutes and the people who worshipped her. So I think that part represented her duties as a goddess on one side, but then the other side, I wouldn't say this is particularly a female thing, but just a human thing, just for emotions, not being able to control that.
Right. She's being shown with very human emotions, and the problem is, the distinction is that gods are not bound by human morality. The definition of a god is someone who is not bound in the way that humans are. And humans are bound by morality and mortality. So she doesn't have to play by the rules that mortals do, and so she acts capriciously and does whatever, responds immediately to her emotions, and rages out as a result of this, and plays her daughter card in order to prevail upon the king of the gods to release the bull, and then does her duties, which actually to me feels more like a mortal woman thing in a way, because the kinds of rituals that they're talking about are the kinds of things that women might have been responsible for. The other context for this is that other women in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I didn't make you read the whole thing, but other women in the Epic of Gilgamesh tend to demonstrate wisdom and constructive behavior. Particularly mortal women like Shamhat, who's the harlot who civilizes Enkidu, turns Enkidu from a beast into a man who cares about the community. So, given the way that the rest of the epic, which, to be fair, I know you didn't read, the rest of the epic shows wisdom as a female trait, and this is characteristic of the ancient world in general. The capriciousness of Ishtar seems to connect more to the fact that she's a god, and so of course she acts irresponsibly and rewards good behavior of punishment. Anything about the story that stood out to you as something that didn't make sense to you? You weren't sure what it meant. You were curious about as you were reading, and you're wondering, what the heck this was, and yeah.
I just thought about this now, but does the bull itself represent something related to Ishtar? Like, in some cultures the bull represents fertility or something to that nature. Could that apply here?
Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say something about the bull being the Taurus constellation.
Right, and I think that it's a good instinct to wonder about that. And Ishtar is the goddess of fertility, and so it's reasonable that Ishtar would think of the bull as something that would be connected to her. But in general, in the ancient world, the bull represents the power, the great potency of the forces of nature. And we see that in a lot of different ancient cultures. The bull tends to represent, the extreme power of nature. And so this is Ishtar thinking, what can I send at Gilgamesh and Enkidu to punish them? What are the biggest guns we have in heaven? And she thinks of the bull of heaven. She has to get permission to use it because it's not hers. So it's the power of the natural world, and Gilgamesh conquering that is part of the story of humanity exerting power over the forces of nature. Other questions about Gilgamesh? Okay, so remember to make sure to post for this week's reading. We're going to have we're going to have readings every week, and the idea here is that obviously the textbook is written by people that weren't there. I wasn't there. You might think that I might have been because I'm so horrendously old, but I wasn't actually there. I'm not giving you first-hand testimony. So we need these primary. This is, to me, the textbook is giving you background information so that you have a context for what it is that we're talking about. But the primary sources for me are the things that are the greatest opportunity, because we're hearing actual voices from thousands and thousands of years ago telling us what's important to them. What greater gift could we possibly have for a course in history of the ancient religions? So make sure to spend time, set aside time to spend it with the primary source reading. Read through it once, and then go back and look through it for the moments that stand out to you, and throw those into the discussion, and talk about what's confusing, what's stimulating, what's obscure, what you want to know more about. And I will do my best to be as involved in that as I can be, so that it can be a more of an interactive discussion. So Thursday first post, Sunday second post, and then the quiz too. Any other questions before we continue onward? Okay, great, cool. All right, let's talk about polytheism. Polytheism. There are, I don't know how it is that the Greeks ended up with the naming rights for everything in ancient history. But all right, so first question, which might seem to be a little obvious. How is polytheism different from monotheism?
Yeah, so monotheism, you basically believe in just one God. Polytheism, you believe in two or even more gods.
Right, so it's a difference in quantity. Is that all? How else is polytheism different from monotheism? Yes?
Polytheistic, the pantheon can change too, so not only there are more than one, but they can add and drop deities.
Right, yeah, polytheism, the pantheon tends not to be fixed. It's not just it can change, but the polytheism tends to be fluid across generations, and of course is different from place to place. What else?
It seems like it's explained that in polytheism the gods work together to come to like an agreement on what certain people's fate should be.
Right. So this plays into one of the things that comes up in the text, which is that okay. So if polytheism consists of multiple gods, what does it mean when we say that polytheistic people tend to believe in a unity of the divine? Monotheism comes about as an assertion, and the idea of polytheism was sort of the other. When people were talking about their own monotheism, monotheism is something that is a creed, and the polytheism people are the not us. But there's more to it than that. There's something that we can say that polytheistic peoples tend to believe in, and one of this seems to be this idea of unity of the divine. But what do we mean by that, then? What do we mean by a unity of the divine? What is it that we're talking about when we say that we have all of these gods? Yeah. No. Yes.
I guess if you're saying you have all these gods, you usually will make a mythology for them and like kind of like a story for what they do in heaven or whatever realm they live in. Like you make a mythology.
Okay, so you make a mythology and they end up being woven into a tapestry. Yes.
Yeah, that like the gods have like ever-changing stories and they have interactions with themselves and with humans.
Right, so there's a sense that the gods are connected with each other, that they're interacting with each other. There's a sense, as you were saying, that the gods are working together, that there is a divine world that is separate from the human world. And polytheism is the human relation not with a collection of individual gods, but with the divine world as a holistic system. Human interaction with the divine world. And the contents of that divine world interact with each other, are linked to each other, are fluid and change from generation to generation. Just as human society is not made up of individuals, the ancients believed that human society is not made up of individuals. It's made up of bonds between individuals. The marital bond, the friendship bond between men, the friendship bond between women, the relationship between parent and child. These are the things that society is made up of, because your connection to others connects you to the entire community. And that is what brings the needs of the community in perspective for you. That's what allows you to place the needs of the community ahead of yourself. the society, human society, is made up is not made up of individuals. It's made up of the bonds between individuals. And in the ancient world, the divine is also not just a collection of gods. It's not just a list of, okay, we have, Zeus, Hera, Apollo, we have Enlil and Inanna, we have, Horus and Ra and Isis and Osiris and Anubis. It's not just, a list of the bold-faced names that show up in the mythology. It's an entire divine system. And we interact with that collectively. And this serves as a kind of contrast to the mortal world. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but how people, we should remember to bear in mind that religion is not it's not a pre-existing thing. It's not an intrinsic element of the natural world. Religion is a construct. The Latin word religio refers to the system of rules and expectations and so forth that relates to the connection between humans and the divine world. Religion is a construct, and it's constructed in the way that it is in order to serve human needs. So all through this class, what we need to look at in every situation, in every society we're discussing, in every facet of the nature of religion, we need to look at this from the practical perspective of what function is this serving. How is it that religion is constructed in this way so that it results in an edifice shaped like this? Religion is a human construct. Okay, so we have this tripartite theory of polytheism in particular. Although, so this is the breakdown of polytheism, and this comes to us from a bona fide polytheist, namely the Roman scholar Varro, who lived in the 1st century BCE, so this is before there were even any Christians. And the Romans didn't particularly understand Judaism, they just thought it was another mystery cult. So that was particularly problematic for them because it resisted assimilation. But we'll talk about that when we get to the Israelites and Judeans. So Varro is talking about his own culture, and he breaks down the way people relate to God into 3 spheres or dimensions. But it occurred to me as I was reading this sounds familiar. As somebody who's raised as a Christian, I was like, well, yeah, 3 spheres or dimensions. That seems to be not a coincidence. In other words, we have a lot of people wonder about Christianity. People who are alien to Christianity look at it and say, okay, wait, so there's one God, right? Yes, one God. But there's 3 gods. Yes, there's 3 gods. But it's 3 gods that are one God. Right, that's right, you got it. The nature of the Holy Trinity is strange unless you look at it as being a successor to the way in which people arrange polytheism. a way in which people thought about the gods in 3 different dimensions before Christianity came along. And, this doesn't happen for Judaism. Judaism doesn't have anything like a Trinity. Why? Because Judaism is not available to outsiders. There was no evangelism, there's no missionary work, there's no effort to adapt Judaism to anything other than the people that it adhered to and that formed their culture around it. Christianity had to adapt, its beliefs and its dogma to the existing pagan population. And so, as it adapted, it developed a set of ways of talking about God that reflected things that people were already familiar with subconsciously in how they thought about the pantheons of gods. That's just a theory of mine, and you're welcome to disagree with it, but let's wait until we talk about Christianity. So hold that thought, and then later on, toward the end of the course, we'll come back around and talk about Christianity, and then we can revisit how closely the Holy Trinity of Christianity connects with this very scholarly theory from Varro that we're about to talk about. So there are 3 components, which makes sense for a tripartite. There are 3 components, 3 dimensions. One is natural or cosmic. So this is that divine world itself that I was talking about. A second is political, which is to say, political not in the sense of Democrat or Republican, political in the sense of the word polis is the Greek word for city-state. And so what we're talking about here is the relation, the city-states, the polity, the rulers and powerful who represent the people, how they interact with, and the priests, how they interact with the divine world. And then the mythic or narrative, which reflects the stories that the ordinary people tell about the gods and pass on from one generation to the next. And a lot of these are, very personal stories about, how the gods act. Things like, what Ishtar did to her former lovers, and, whether Hephaestus was able to get it on with another god despite being a cripple. All these kinds of things create an embroidered tapestry that is constantly changing, being worked and reworked generation to generation. That's part of the persistence of religion from one generation to the next. So the cosmos, cosmos, another Greek word that describes the way that describes the sort of chaos of the world beyond what is known, beyond what is experienced by mortals. So this cosmic world is the cosmic aspect of polytheism. This is the divine world that exists entirely apart from human experience. This is the part of the existence of the gods that only involves the system of the divine. It doesn't involve interaction. with humans. So if it doesn't involve interaction with humans, why does it exist? Why was it invented? If we're looking for the function, if we're looking for the reason why, aspects of religion are invented, why is there a need for this part of it that doesn't have anything to do with humans at all? Why do you think that people would develop this part of it? Why do you think they would develop this totally separate divine world? Yeah.
To make sense of nonsense.
Make sense of nonsense. What do you mean by that?
Well, first off, by looking at prehistoric, ancient mind without the use of scientific technology, they wouldn't understand why an earthquake happens,
Right.
why storms happen, why volcano erupts. Therefore, they have to use human personification for that.
Right? What are you going to say?
Totally forgot.
Oh, great. It'll come back in.
Okay, back. I was gonna say like when humans come to have that to be like the origins of your nature or an example or a role model as to what could happen when humans or the mortal existence comes into place.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's there's a lot of trying to figure out, make sense of what is, and make sense of what is possible. It should be remembered that part of the point of this is empowerment. The way in which the gods are structured and interact with each other. The fact that allows us to understand empowers us, because, as you said, otherwise it's nonsense. It produces fear and anxiety, the way that people existed before civilization, enthralled to the vicissitudes of nature with this kind of structure, with this understanding of not just the powers of the natural world, but how they are interactive with each other. That structure provides a sense of empowerment. And it provides an explanation. The interesting thing about this is that sometimes you find that the gods are directly involved in the machinery of the cosmos. So, you have Helios actually driving the sun across the sky, as part of the workings, the systems of the earth. Sometimes these things become background, and the gods are more free to interact. So this is one of the things that's variable. One of the things to look for, maybe, is how free the gods are from the systems they represent. So it's seen as a social structure. It's seen as a way of providing, of understanding balance, of seeing balance in a chaotic world. Even antagonistic gods provide balance with each other, and gods that cooperate with each other reinforce balance and harmony. And then, it's not completely divorced from humanity, because the natural forces themselves provide evidence. Sometimes the natural forces are perverted in a way that yields omens, nature seeming to speak to us, and prodigies, nature being malformed in such a way as to provide an alarm, two-headed calves, and babies born with no eyes, and that kind of thing. The sense of people being taken care of or not by the gods, depending on which culture they live in. So the political What's the so what's the point of the political side? The political side is the powerful of the community interacting with the gods. What does that do for the people? Apart from making certain members of the community more powerful than others, the cultic aspect tends to empower certain members of the community over others, priests and kings and this kind of thing, people that are able to interpret the will of the gods. What else does the processes of the city interacting with the gods do for them? Why else does this part of it exist, do you think? Is that a hand or? Yeah, go ahead.
To bring structure so that there isn't chaos within people.
Bring structure within the community, absolutely. The rituals and sacrifices and all of the regularity of the cultic aspect of polytheism is part of the means of providing structure and stability within the community. So you have a formal interface. You have a formal interface. This is something that mitigates the empowerment of individuals in a way, because this formal interface is a set of rules that is undertaken regardless of who's in power. So those positions might be coveted, but the rules are beyond them. The rules are maintained regardless of who is the chief priest or who is the king. And so this provides a level of stability, from reign to reign and from generation to generation. This is stability over time. This also leads to the emergence of patron deities, where, I talked about before, each city-state chooses a particular god to be especially potent. So Marduk in Babylon, and Athena in Athens, and Ashur in Assyria. These tend to go one step further beyond stabilizing community and reinforce civic pride, and become a lever by which one city can exert its potency and its dominance. Just the building of monumental temples to their town god, to their patron deity, is a means of demonstrating potency, and the special relationship with that god motivates people to become stronger, to expand their influence, to become a more potent city. And the way that the divine world is diverse is a nice reflection into the human world. So there's also a discharging of responsibility and reciprocity involved in these rituals and sacrifices. I mentioned before that the people feel a need to ensure that they understand that the wealth that they are able to achieve is owing to the gods. And so by persisting in these rituals and sacrifices, people are able to discharge that debt. And to keep that prosperity going. So the gods will continue to do that. It's a means of ensuring the cyclic nature of gods doing what they do and humans recognizing it, discharging that debt so that it can continue. And so finally we have the mythic or the narrative. This is the, in some ways, this is the thing that came up first when I was asked you about this, right? This is the thing that was mentioned first, the stories that are told. One of the things that came up in the text was that the gods are always shown in stories interacting with each other. The gods seem to be shown in mythology seems to be very largely about gods interacting with each other, and to a lesser extent with humans. And so the mythology, reinforces the idea that the gods are not don't act on their own. Look at our reading from last week. Ishtar wants to punish Gilgamesh. She can't do that on her own. She must interact with the other gods in order for the divine world to send punishment to Gilgamesh in the form of the bull of heaven. The funny thing is about this too that mythology isn't connected to worship. It's separate from the cultic practice. So it serves a different function.
If Ishtar, because of the divine unity, had to go and ask her father before she could punish Gilgamesh, did she also ask him for approval to try to wed him?
That's a good question. The wedding would have had to have had approval, for it to go forward. So she didn't ask. It doesn't seem like she asked first, but she wouldn't have been able to actually consummate the marriage without the approval of the other gods. Or there would have been war in heaven or something like that, which would be interesting in a Sumerian context. So what is mythology doing? Telling these stories. Partly mythology is providing a fabric at the oral private level within families that reinforces people's ideas about society and their own culture, that carries these things forward. The cultic is about the public world, the state's interaction with the gods. The mythology is about ordinary people. It's the stories that people tell orally that are passed on from parent to child, and that are discussed amongst each other and used as examples and are part of the cultural furniture. There are means of talking about ideas by using examples from mythology. There's a Star Trek Next Generation episode where there's a culture that spoke entirely in mythological metaphors. That's the extreme example. It's called Darmok, if you wanted to look that up. All right, so then there's this third thing called the theologization of history. What the hell is that? If you got to that section of the reading, what the heck is this author talking about? What is theologization of history? Yes?
When the gods put their 2 cents in history, like they make it with losses, victories, they can do things to a population that will affect their future.
Right, so this is the gods going beyond. The only interaction between the divine world and the human world is the cultic rituals, right? According to the tripartite theory, because the divine world is separate and mythology is all within the human world. It's just stories that we tell ourselves as metaphors. And the cultic aspect is unchanging rituals that go over time. So there's this dimension that seems to be missing from the tripartite theory, the way in which people develop a need to see the gods as shaping human history. Why do you think people see a need Why do you think that people develop a need to see the gods shaping human history? Why would we want that? Why would we want to have, the gods sticking their hands into our daily life? What's the possible benefit of that? Because remember, these are constructs that result from human needs. Yeah.
I think it could be a form of justification or scapegoat in certain situations.
Mhm.
Like if, for example, something bad happens and then, you can blame the king or someone who's in power because they didn't please the gods.
Right. So this is a way of asserting authority over the people that offended the gods, and you can be the one to set it right. This works for a new regime chasing out an old regime, and it also works for conquering someone else. A good example of the first is that during the Second Punic War, when Hannibal is invading the Roman Empire, right, and Hannibal gets into Italy and defeats the Romans disastrously, annihilates the Roman legions at the Battle of Lake Trasimene. And the Romans are terrified that Hannibal's going to march on Rome and utterly wipe the city off the map. And they have every reason to fear that. And so a dictator is put in charge named Fabius Maximus. And Fabius Maximus calms the people by placing the blame for the disaster on the previous consuls who failed to observe the appropriate religious rituals in such an egregious way that the wrath of the gods was visited upon the Roman armies. And by reinstating those rituals and by clarifying that what Rome needs to do is to ensure that the gods are happy, Fabius is able to galvanize the Roman morale and allow them to withstand the threat of Hannibal long enough to be able to come back and eventually turn the war around. The conquest of previous regimes and the conquest of foreign regimes, allows for the idea of religious guilt and divine punishment. And this has profound implications for how people think about the gods, because that concept of religious guilt and divine punishment that starts out at the macro level starts to seep down to personal. And this is critical because the idea of personal responsibility for behaving properly toward the gods is not an inherent pagan concept. The pagans don't think that way. The pagans think in terms of the community's reaction with the divine world through the cultic, through sacrifice and ritual. That's the normal way of interaction with the gods. That there is an interface that is collective on both sides. Okay? That is how, the polytheistic societies of the ancient world think about the gods. It's a community of humans interacts with the community of the divine. And so this concept of divine guilt and punishment that starts out at the level of the community starts to be used as a weapon towards people within the culture, and ends up leading to the entire era of the Middle Ages, where all that mattered was personal salvation and the manipulation of the church to allow people to believe that they were capable of achieving it. All right, that's where I'm at. Any other questions or concerns? I have a few videos about Syria and Babylon. The main thing to bear in mind in terms of Babylon is that Babylon emerges as a powerful city-state, so powerful that its patron god, Marduk, is used as the symbol for the conquering power of Babylon. And this leads to the emergence of Babylon enforcing its god on the rest of its domains. The people of Babylonia start out worshiping old Sumerian gods, but with Babylon, the city of Babylon taking charge, Marduk becomes the symbol of their power. What was your question?
Will the virtual test this week be timed?
Yes, it is timed. So please make sure that you have done the readings and thought about them, both the textbook readings and the primary source readings before you sit down and take the quiz. Remember, there will be many quizzes, so if this one isn't it doesn't go as well as you might have hoped, the lowest quiz grade is dropped, and you'll then understand better with each iteration how the quizzes work, and your quiz grade is guaranteed to improve. Not guaranteed. The quiz grade will tend to improve. Come to me with any questions. Send me emails. Office hours at 5 o'clock. If you did not sign the attendance sheet, please do so. Have a great week, and I will see you on Tuesday.